Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 83 of the Peak Serenity podcast. I am one of your hosts, emallson, and as always, I am joined by my co host, Anomoly.
Hello.
And this week, we are going to be talking about more 915 stuff, but also some data mining about potential re release of the Mage Tower, one of the most popular pieces of solo content ever produced. Um, there's been a bunch of data mining that indicates it might be coming back. So we're going to talk about that. But before we get into all of that fun stuff, how is Sylvanas going, Anam?
It's fun. I think it's a lot of phase one right now for us. And we finally made a couple of pushes late on our Thursday raid, so our second raid of the week. Probably in the last like hour and a half, 2 hours of that raid. Made some pushes into phase two and started to see some of the platforms there. But
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of phase one, spending a lot of time there. So it's
Phase one, no joke.
yeah, it's draining and it's yeah, we're it's weird. We are wiping to like, at this point, we're just wiping to people making, like, minor mistakes, and unfortunately, it's just, like, those it's another,
Stuff like melee walking into an arrow and triggering calamity.
yeah, we've seen that, we've had actually it's more people like, some people getting clipped by Veil, like, the
Mm-hmm.
wrong people getting chained, um, it's funny, the ultimately, the worst part for us is the final set of, like, arrows, daggers, like, right before you hit the, like, intermission.
Uh-huh.
Like, that area just, like, people lose their head about, like, dodging the desecrating shots on the ground and, like, sentinels are running everywhere. So we've gotta
Yeah.
clean that up, I'd say. But no, it's been I mean, to be fair, it's I don't know, it's the last boss. I think it's okay so far. A lot of my guild's not exactly excited to be progressing, but I think the fight's fine. Um,
Yeah. I actually
not
kind of
sorry.
like phase one on Mythic. So
Yeah.
for us, we are actually, it sounds like kind of at a similar point. We are not quite as far.
Mhm.
Um, we are only we've technically made it into phase two, but it's very technically because
Yeah.
practically we've had like five people alive, and that you're not actually progressing phase two with five people alive.
Yeah.
Um, so the we spent a lot of Friday working through. Friday was our first full night on it. We spent a lot of Friday working through positioning, getting stuff figured out with like the different baits, learning
Mhm.
about how you can bait Sylvanas' position after she jumps for dropping the
Yep.
arrows. So like we knew about the veil bait going in, but in my prep at least, I had missed the part where you can bait where she lands after she does her little dance for the domination arrow. So
Yeah.
she jumps away from the raid basically. So you have the raid positioned opposite of where you want her to go, and then she goes there. So that
Yeah.
means that you can use that to basically bait her to land near the arrows and get a bunch of extra damage because she's in range.
Yeah.
Um, so that was big. So we started reaching the point that I think we're going in. We're not going to be using potions anymore in phase one, uh, because we the damage check is we are doing too much damage and need to do less so that we do not push her too early. Like while we have 30 sentinels up.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still potting on the pull. But like we also have that transition has been like, yeah, we've hit sometimes where like we're ahead, so we have to stop. And
Yeah.
then other times where like we have to push, like we're slightly behind. So yeah, but we started the one thing we did start to do in that transition is start the CC of the Sentinels further away from the boss. That way,
Mm-hmm.
like, there's no chance of random AOE or anything like that getting triggered on the boss. So, yeah, a little bit of like some adjustments there, but
Oh,
I
I
mean,
have a question for you. Where is
yeah.
Sylvanas positioned when you're doing the last set of Sentinels?
So she is between the two arrow spawns.
Okay.
So for us, we've positioned her like those two arrows that spawn, and then at least for our
The
stack
third
point.
set of domination arrows that you do.
Yeah. Yeah, so she's basically almost right in the middle of that. So we run out to
Okay.
the far side of the room, drop the sentinel. Sentinels come in, we can cleave the arrows and her.
Yeah.
And then generally our bait point for the intermission is like right by one of those arrow spawns.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so
That's the
yeah, so
same
that's where we
setup that
push.
we have, and we were having some discussion about like whether we should try and push her more into the center of the room so that she's closer to the sentinels and we can like start grouping them up sooner. Um,
So we actually don't. So like our sentinel spawns, we realize that the damage drop off is like between 0 and 15 yards or 0 in the graphic, it's a ton. But like once you get beyond that 15 yards, like the 15 to 40-yard drop off isn't significant enough.
yeah,
So for us, we ended up
you just
basically
drop them
having folks like,
closer.
yeah, we just pull arrows people closer, right? But we
Okay.
also run like I'll run a barrier there, and then basically both my monk cooldowns, so revival and both my throughput stuff's there. So that's sort of how we've adjusted, not dropping everything further away. Because we used to have people just book it as far away as they can, and what we found
Yeah.
is that in certain cases, one of the people running out as or like the second arrow drop would clip the third arrow or would get clipped by the third arrow
We've run
drop
into
person
that
running
too.
out.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically have people just be a little bit closer and then use like either a gate to get back in or like a movement like a port or a blink or something like that. So
Yeah.
depending on who you are. That's how we sort of adjusted it, at least getting sentinels closer. And then we also started CCing them further away from the boss in that set so that there's not a lot of cleave and it's become slightly more consistent. It's funny, we missed the damage push on our last attempt of the night on Thursday. So that's a little heartbreaking. But yeah, I mean we've seen phase two with everybody alive probably 5 or 6 times and saw phase three once, but similar to your phase
Nice.
two, like it was like I think two people were alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was wasn't a real phase three attempt. But I mean phase two is actually a lot more enjoyable than I thought it would be. There's a lot more damage than I thought there would be,
We
which
had
is
so we're still doing heroic runs on off nights. We just replaced my co tank, so I've got a new co tank for this boss, which is fun.
mhm,
He's main swapping, so we're helping gear him up. We're doing like heroic plate stacks basically to
yeah.
try and get him gear. Um, and one of the raiders from the weekday team in our guild was complaining about how awful the heroic version of phase 2 is compared to the mythic version.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah. It's real bad. It's funny. It's one of the fights that I think really shows the first time that I really saw it was like they basically that Blizzard designs a fight as a mythic version first and then pull stuff away as you lower the difficulty, right? And
yeah,
like I think Sylvanas is like a very good example of them saying like, okay, like we created the mythic version, that's the version of the fight we think everybody should do, and then they're starting to pull stuff. You can see them like what they pulled off for heroic. And yeah, phase two heroic is like just god awful. Even phase one heroic, I feel like is with the
it's
random arrow
noticeably worse.
spawns. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
also pretty bad. So yeah, it's a
I
lot
feel
of
like it actually would have been a better and actually easier heroic fight if they had left phase 1 like the mythic version
yeah,
where you've got the stacked arrow spawns because then you can actually effectively bait things. And
exactly. Yeah,
maybe that wouldn't have been as easy for pugs. I don't know. I feel like it probably would have been because you can't count on your average pug having a boomkin.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly,
but
exactly.
it would have been a lot easier for us because then, you can actually control phase 1. It's not just like veiling all over the place.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Makes it a lot easier, and like resetting stacks and everything becomes easier too.
Yeah.
All across the board. But no, I mean Sylvanas Prague going well. I mean we're about 80 pulls in, 85 pulls in, so
Yeah.
it'll be a long one. But I feel like once we get through phase two pretty consistently, it's just phase three seems well not easy, seems like easier than like the first two. So we'll see though.
Yeah. I'm
We'll
uh
see.
I'm not going to speculate about the difficulty of that phase.
Fair. That's fair.
It's too far off.
That's fair.
Um, and also from everything that I've seen, uh, a lot of the difficulty of progressing phase 3 just comes from consistently getting through the first 10 minutes of the fight to see phase 3 in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's gonna be the tough part is that yeah, those are gonna be like the pulls where you're like, oh, we're perfect, and then one mistake heading into phase three, or even like early
Your
on in phase
healer
three.
your healer
Sucks.
walks off the last bridge in the
Yeah.
intermission or in phase 2, stuff like that.
Yeah. We had a couple of those where people just like thought it was one pattern bridge and it was the pattern where it's like the rock with the hole right in the center and they just like walked
Yes,
right into it.
right
Like our
into it.
raid leader blinked and then ran and then you just hear him like here's like keyboard or his death slam. It's like great.
Yeah.
So
Oh man, those bridges secretly one of the deadliest mechanics.
yeah, they're super inconsistent. So um, but cool. Yeah, there we go. Any other notes on Sylvanas's progression wise?
I do think that it is a lot more fun on Mythic than it was on Heroic. I really did not like the
Yeah,
Heroic version of the fight, but even just like doing the Mythic version is actually substantially better, even just
yeah,
in Phase One.
yeah. No, 100% agreed. 100% agreed. So um, well, cool. So let's do. I guess we'll do a little bit of weekend review stuff. So a lot of this, since I think the topic of today is sort of talking about like the Mage Tower speculation and some other stuff there. We'll sort of mix in weekend review some of the 915 updates
Yeah,
that don't sort of pertain to that, along with some. There really wasn't much on live that happened. So I think the biggest thing
yeah,
that happened on live last week was just they basically did a hot fix to now reset conduit energy every day. So every day you basically
yeah,
get 10 new conduit energy, uh, which I'm assuming is their like quick and dirty fix
yeah.
to get
This
something in a
covers
hot fix.
like 90% of use cases. Like you have to swap conduits. You're swapping when you swap conduits for different builds or whatever. You maybe
Hmm.
swap 3 conduits. So you have to be swapping 4 times per day in order to hit the limit with the rate it's
Right.
at right now. So this is a really like this covers 99.999 percent of cases. You don't have to worry about conduit energy anymore. 915 comes out, it'll be completely gone, and that'll cover the last 0.0001% of cases. So this is
Yeah.
good.
Oh yeah. No. Yeah. It's definitely was a nice at least interim fix before we get sort of just the free swaps. With 915. So yeah, so that's sort of a nice little live thing that they did. And then in terms of 915, they did. It seems like this might be their approach moving forward, but they did a big sort of week. It sounds like they're going to hopefully start doing like weekly posts, basically about what's changing or at least what they're thinking about implementing on PCR, which is really nice. So we got a big post about a bunch of different things. So like, hey, here's some like class changes. They went over like some other item or other changes they're doing in terms of like
There's so
I don't
many
know.
quality of life changes in this, and I want to go
Yeah,
through a couple of them. Just
sure.
because some of them you have on the notes, like broken out, like the Torghast changes.
Yeah.
Um, but so I guess first off, let's do the class changes that are relevant to Monk
Yeah,
because
which I think it was only the one, but
right,
Brewmaster, of course, their special delivery talent now deals 100% more damage, which
yeah.
is that big,
Uh,
good?
well, it's complicated. The so special delivery with the damage buff, we need to make further adjustments to the APL and SimC to really know whether it's competitive.
Yeah,
Because Rushing Jade Wind costing a GCD is actually an upside in a way, because it makes the APL easier to write, because that GCD is then free and you regenerate energy during it, which
gotcha.
makes the rest of the APL easier to implement. Special Delivery does not, also actually, with the APL with Rushing Jade Wind, we don't worry about like using every single brew. We just have to worry about using them when it's going to benefit Invoke Neozao.
Gotcha.
With special delivery, we need to actually make sure we're using 100% of them all the time, and we need to make sure that we're not, uh, spending so much energy that we can't cast Keg Smash, stuff like that. So there's some more APL tweaks that we need to do in order to properly sim this. Preliminary
Mhm.
numbers say it's actually going to be close to Rushing Jade Wind, maybe ahead of Rushing Jade Wind, so it may actually be a situation where you can pick the one you want. Um,
Gotcha.
I definitely like if it's close, I will definitely be picking special delivery sometimes because I it's silly and I love it. Um, but Rushing Jade Wind is
True.
also a talent that I've been playing with for literally half a decade now, and it's kind of ingrained in my mind. I just like Rushing Jade Wind is on the G key for me, so I just like press G to
Yeah,
refresh it like habitually. Um, so we will
that's
see how
funny.
that uh, pans out, but we may be returning to something approximating Nighthold Brewmaster, where
Oh, very
you
cool.
you run special delivery and you just like spam kegs all day because Purifying Brew CD is so low.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so I think. that sounds like at least good in terms of, like, giving you guys some more variety and stuff like that, from a talent perspective. Um, I guess too, special delivery it's pat is this the one that, like, throws an extra keg, right? From, like or drops it from the
So
sky?
yeah, it drops it from the sky. So super silly, but like when you drink a brew, it throws a keg in the sky. 3 seconds later, it lands. Used to be that it basically fixed on the location of your target when you cast it.
Yeah,
So it would like pick your target. If your target moved out, it wouldn't hit anything. Which meant that it had this downside of like being able to miss that Rushing Jade Wind didn't
yeah,
have. So even when special delivery was numerically better, it still often wasn't picked because of that. That's no longer the case as of like I think Shadowlands. It
okay,
will always hit its primary target even if the primary target moves out. It's just the AoE that it does depends on what else is still in that.
gotcha, okay.
But yeah, it's like I have fond memories of doing Nighthold and just like drinking so much Ironskin Brew that I had 10 minutes of Ironskin Brew and kegs falling from the sky all over the place.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it's
that's awesome.
it's it's very fun. I like it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so I think I mean that's super cool. Yeah, and we'll see if they're it seems like they're making changes. There's a bunch of other class changes. They seem very much like single ability focused, so
Yeah,
they're probably honestly just to be fair not putting everything in at once, just as they think they need to make changes to something, just dropping it into the build,
yeah.
which
I think
I
that
think
is
is a good
good.
thing.
I
Yeah.
think that is good, especially with stuff like so again special delivery. We have to update the AP. Like
Yeah.
the initial sims that Peo did indicated that special delivery was still worse, but then he dug into it. It was like, oh, it's still worse because it's like energy starving now without the rushing Jade Wind time on GCDs. So
Yeah.
now it's like delaying and it's losing like 25% of its keg smashes. And so now we got to get that fixed, and then we run it again, and we'll see how it comes out. I might work on that this afternoon.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
but yeah,
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, and then so that's good. Yeah, and then, like I said, other sort of some class changes in there. So nice that they got ahead of that, getting this out there in terms of like giving us this list. And then yeah, you're right. So they did put in a bunch of quality of life stuff. So we can kind of go through it if you had some particular highlights. I pulled out some of the stuff that I thought was somewhat important. But I don't know if there's anything specific you wanted to cover, and then we can sort of just make sure we hit all of the
yeah.
ones I had. So
So I'm gonna pull up the patch notes on stream.
mhm.
Uh, because I think there's actually a lot here for it being, a half patch at point 0.5 patch. So first off, this one it really just always annoyed me, and I'm glad they're fixing it. So the Redeem Souls quests that you had to like
Mhm.
go around in the maw and like you killed the rock and then there was a soul and you clicked the soul.
Yeah.
Uh, Now rescuing souls from Torghast counts for that. I don't know why it didn't in 9. I mean, I have a guess as to why, but I don't know why it didn't in
Yeah.
9.0. Small thing, but pretty big because that means that now by doing Torghast, you also naturally complete those. That's good for renown catch up because you get that done for free. It's good for
Oh yeah.
catching up your Covenant Sanctum because now that quest is also going to be repeatable. So you can just like do Torghast, which we'll also get to. Actually, we should just Torghast now gives the full amount of Soul Ash and Soul Cinders from every run. There is no longer a weekly cap.
Yeah, which is really cool.
So that means that now there's like you can literally. This is something that people have been asking for in general in WoW for a long time. Is like it's okay to
Mhm.
have the grind. It's okay even to have some time gated grinds, but having everything be weekly lockouts and daily resets and that kind of thing really like grinds on you. You know,
Yeah. Well, that
so being able to like take a weekend and be like, I'm gonna grind Torghast for 3 hours today, and just like blast it out, get a bunch of redeemed souls, get a bunch of soul ash and soul senders, and then I don't have to worry about doing Torghast for the next month because I did it already. That's gonna be
right.
great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I mean, to be fair, the numbers here, they actually almost doubled it, right? So you go from like 500 a week or whatever you would get, to almost 1,000 if you just did 2 runs, right? But
Yeah,
now it's of course, it's also repeatable indefinitely. So technically, you just essentially double the amount of soul, in this case, soul cinders you get, each time you run, a Torghast swing,
right. So that's
which is crazy.
significantly increased the amount of soul cinders awarded. So yeah, that's like basically doubling it. That's great. One of the annoyances I have had with the legendary system, like the legendary system, I think in Shadowlands is mostly good.
Yeah.
Couple annoyances. One of them is the rate at which you can acquire the currency that you need to craft a legend, because it means that you really are limited in how many legendaries you can build. There's all these other ones that might be interesting to you, but you just can't use them because you don't have the currency. Or
Right.
well, nowadays you can use them at 235, which is good enough for me, but a lot of people hate using ones that aren't like maxed out.
Yeah.
Um, so that's nice. Um, Also, increase the drop rate of shards of domination. Nobody's rating on PTR. We don't know what the number actually is right now. But
I'm hoping it just means you get the gems in like a full clear.
yeah, I would
Right.
be
Like,
I would expect it to be like tuned around completing all or getting all 9 gems in around 2 raid clears.
yeah.
Because if you do that, then the odds of you having the gems in order to complete a set in a single clear, any set, are very high. Because all you have to do, as long as you get um, 7 gems, you're guaranteed to be able to turn on at least one, or no, I don't remember. It's 6 or 7 gems. You're guaranteed to
Yeah.
be able to complete the set. And if you get 5, you're very high odds to have one set complete that you. Um,
Yeah.
so being able to like pretty much guarantee that you're gonna have a set that you can use in 2 weeks is good. That would be my guess as to where they're targeting it.
Yeah. It's good for, I mean, it's good for alts too, right? Like, I think a lot of these
Yes.
changes, are people are saying, oh, it's great quality of life stuff, but I think it's more just like alt stuff, right?
Yeah,
It
and
seems
one of
like,
those things like right here, you can buy a 500 gold, which is nothing. You can buy
yeah,
renown 40 on an alt.
yeah, which is super cool. Yeah.
Uh,
Which I think to be fair, like as we look at this, right? Like I feel like this is almost something that Blizzard should look at in terms of like at a certain month, whatever that ends up being, or week after a patch, right? Start to add systems like this, regardless of hot fixes, right? So like take the idea of saying like, look, you have to have a like doing unlimited like having unlimited soul cinders at the launch of 9-1 is not, I don't think, the answer, because then basically you have your max level legendaries in a week or in a day, right? Through grinding. So I think there has to be some sort of gating there, but do it more like maybe having it cap out like your conquest caps or valor caps, but after like week 3 or 4 just remove the cap or make the cap like 1 million,
so
right?
one of the things they could do as well. So the way they released the Torghast, where you got like layers 8 through 12. So this tier was 9 through 12. So
Yeah.
first week 9 came out, then 10, then 11, then 12, and then basically make it like a quest. Turn in from doing you complete layer 12, and now you can do it infinitely. Then
That's true.
a month into the patch, you can do it infinitely. It's just built into the patch. So then
Yeah.
there's not as much pressure to get your grind on, week 1. Um,
Yeah.
but then going in like, okay, I don't really have to stress about missing a week here, because if I miss a week here, then in 2 weeks I can just make it up by doing an extra Torghast run.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and if they time it too, where like doing that first layer or whatever that ends up being, right? Doing that layer 12 that week also gives you the amount of currency you need to make your first legendary. You don't have
Yeah,
to then like continually do it. You just say, hey, I'm only ever going to use one legendary at max
yeah.
level. So yeah, I have it all there. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, but the renown
Um,
catch up is nice too, coupled with the fact that you don't have to do the campaign quests anymore.
yes.
Is like
Oh
really,
yeah.
yeah, it's like a really good change in terms of like skipping ahead on alts in certain cases, or
Um,
catching yourselves up with certain covenants, right? If you want to collect what they have.
So I've complained before about in Final Fantasy not being able to quest for experience on alt jobs, and
Hmm.
I stand by that. I do like questing. I want to do questing, but I also like the experience of the campaign quests in WoW has really highlighted for me that they probably made the correct decision in not having questing be, at least from the main story quest, be like the main way that you level alternate jobs. Um,
Yeah,
because I don't think it actually works out as well as it did in my head.
that's fair.
I still would like
Yeah,
to do it because it has been like 3 years now since I've done some of the story quests in Final Fantasy, and 3 years on, I'm okay going back and redoing it. I kind of would like to do that, but doing it multiple times in a single patch so I can level another job or another class, whatever, not
Se-
ideal.
Seems a bit rough. Seems a bit rough for sure. Um, yeah, so lots of at least yeah, those are some quality of life items. They also added another quality of life item is you can now purchase Korthi armaments for specific gear slots.
This is so
So,
good. Oh my god, I spent
yeah.
30,000 Stygia trying to get a shield on my warrior ult.
Yeah, I spent about 25 or 27,000, right, probably around the same amount trying to get the trinket, right? The Tome of Insight trinket. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, this is another solid sort of just like you can target the specific piece you want. You don't
yeah,
have to sort of like,
yeah,
you know, beat around the bush, whatever that ends up being, or like figure it out. So, yeah. So another sort of solid, I guess, solid quality of life change in terms of like being able to target specific gear pieces
yeah. The
from
the
armaments.
variance on that was so big too because there were what, like 12 different pieces you could get from it, and
Yep.
like my paladin got a shield first try. So I just like I got the shield, I ranked it up to like 226 or whatever the easy
Yeah.
one to get to was, and that was that. That was a nice like 30 eye level upgrade.
Yeah.
Um, then I spent 30,000 Stygia on my warrior trying to get a shield. Eventually
Jeez.
got one, and like at that point, it actually was a 40 eye level upgrade for my warrior because my warrior just in general could not get shield drops.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
but yeah, it was like the variance on that was really really high and frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is sort of another, again, quality of life piece that's coming in. So I think you purchase them with Stygia,
Yeah,
which I think you can pass Stygia between characters now.
you can do that.
Uh,
There's also something pro tip. If you have a bunch of level 60 ults like I do, you can park them next to one of the caches near the raid. It respawns every day, and it gives you a account bound item that is 250 Stygia. So I just
oh,
had like 6 characters that I would log into, and that got me basically 2 tries every 3 days without actually doing anything besides like logging in and logging out.
that's not bad. That's not bad at all.
uh, yeah, it was really annoying though, waiting, like just trying to, like I got the boots or whatever like 4 or 5 times before I got the shield. It's just,
Hmm.
yeah, it not no me gusta.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny. Yeah. So there, it seems like yeah, you purchase them with Stygia, so should be an easy way to gear up alts, at least like item level 200. Yeah. Along with Stygia 2, they added in anima passing between alts now too, so you
Yeah,
can create anima items to pass large amounts of anima between characters. Again, nice little quality of life as they sort of remove a lot of the restrictions. Because coupled with this, right, they've also said like the souls quest, right, which I think right now it's probably the limiting factor for a lot of people as they start new characters in
yeah,
leveling up their covenant sanctum, is like souls now being sort of a repeatable quest.
yeah,
Yeah, you can just boot power boost a lot of your alts, which is a lot of fun
yep.
with a lot of this stuff. um and then the
And
final, oh, sorry.
I think we were both gonna talk about the same thing. The most important quality of life change,
Yeah, the warlock
the
item.
gateway control shard.
Yeah, the gate, which essentially, so for folks who aren't aware, in a lot of fights, we use gateways, particularly in Mythic, to like quickly move from one position to the other. So you use it to like bait certain abilities and sort of move the raid out of the way. Like Veil on Sylvanas is a really good example, not only in phase 1, but in phase 2 on the bridges. You use gateways like that. You also use them on Painsmith to like jump over spikes when there wasn't a hole in the spikes.
Yeah,
We still use them too to group everybody up at the end of a certain spike or at the end of intermissions anyway.
yeah,
Um, and the way that you usually do this is it's very difficult to click a gateway in the middle of a raid while a bunch of other people are also trying to click said gateway and running at it. So
yeah,
you use this idea of basically being able to focus the gateway. So if you use a focus macro, basically just like slash focus at mouse over, put your mouse over the gateway, click the keybind to focus it. And then there was another thing in key bindings that allowed you to interact with mouse over, which essentially just meant you'd hit that key binding while your mouse was over the frame, your focus frame, to then instantly use the gate. It was a convoluted way of doing it. It also removed your ability to focus anything else if you still use that. So what they've done is they've added an ability, or sorry, added an item that essentially allows you now to interact with the closest gateway to you. So basically, like, you just sort of you can now keybind just the item to something, drop it on your action bars, right? And you just smash it, and it'll interact with the closest gateway. They did. I read a couple of folks sort of testing it out. It's generally always the closest gateway portal to you, as long as it's in range. If two gateways are on top of each other, though, it basically picks a random one. um,
Which,
so
if you have two gateways on top of each other, I don't know what you're doing, but it's probably not
exactly.
going to work anyway. Because trying to
It,
like mouse over focus that is you're gonna get a random one anyway.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so definitely, I mean, this has been around for a while. Like, I remember using this in the first time I really ever used it was in early BFA,
Yeah.
uh, which was for was Mithrax, right? We need to jump between
Yes. The
the
rocks.
stones or the rocks, yeah. But it really came into its own, like Nyalotha, like Carapace, you use it to quickly get down the
Yeah.
tunnel. Even on the Zoth a little bit, if you had to move quickly in terms of like at least the psycho phases or the downstairs
Yeah.
phases, right? Um, and then yeah, it's been used a bunch of times here in BFA, or sorry, in Shadowlands. So yeah, this is a nice. Actually, this is great. It just seems just wondering. It's so weird that they've literally created this sort of idea of ways people do these fights just by their fight design, and now they're giving us an item to like essentially say like, yeah, this is how you were supposed to do it. But it's just yeah, it is a
I
great
mean, this
idea.
really cements Warlock as like the one always required class for virtually every, as if they weren't already because of health stones, but
Yeah.
required basically every single time. Like we used gateways extensively on uh the only fight in recent memory that we haven't extensively used gateways. I guess the only two fights are Jaina, the only end fights. Jaina
Hmm.
and Argus.
Yeah. I'm trying to
We
remember on
didn't really
Argus.
use
Yeah.
gateways.
Yeah. Yeah, no, got Argus because you were kind of moving around the room, so you didn't really
Yeah,
have a
you
set
moved in a big
like
circle together.
yeah. You
Well,
didn't
wait,
have a
no, there
set
was the
gateway
like,
point.
did people gateway out to break the chains?
No, because you could because the room would fill up in a lot of cases. I
Okay,
mean, you
yeah,
might have pre-placed them, but like you would have been clicking it. It wouldn't, or sorry, you wouldn't
yeah,
have pre-placed them. You would have placed them as you move.
yeah. So
So
you wouldn't
generally
have
we
been
just
focused.
ran. Yeah, you wouldn't have been
Yeah,
able to focus and do it. But yeah, no, yeah, Argus and Jaina makes Jaina. I'm trying to remember if we ever gate. I mean, we would gateway down the tunnel. I feel like to after you kill the water elementals and come
yeah.
back down. We sometimes gated, but you didn't really need to. You could just walk down that. So
We just walked.
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, yeah. That, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, warlocks are probably required. One of the classes, which I'm fine with. I mean, like you also require priests, right, for stam and
Yeah,
mages for int. So there's like certain classes I think you're always going to bring. So
right. But I mean,
but
like the, the raid buffs will come and go. I would not be surprised if by the time all is said and done, we lose the raid buffs again.
that's true.
But I don't think that they will ever remove demonic gateway. So like
Yeah,
they're faced with the option of like either make it easier and nicer to use or redesign it somehow so that you can't use that.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Um, but yeah, so that's sort of that'll be a fun item to sort of mess around with and see how they do it. I guess the only other minor quality of life thing is you can now fly when you're dead in zones where you can fly normally, which I guess is sort of a minor cool. If you die in like Revendreth, you can fly to get your body
Yeah,
back.
it has come up for me before. There are certain zones that have flying ghosts. Like if you die in Ice Crown, you can always fly there. Actually, even if you didn't have flying, you could fly there.
Unlocked, yeah.
Um, but then there's also stuff like none of the BFA zones had flying while dead. So if you died at like the top mountain that you flew up to, you had to
Good luck.
walk there or take resurrection sickness.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is sort of, I guess, just a quick little quality of life thing.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, maybe we go back to the top of the notes, which is a little bit right. I guess the last item before we get into the main topic today. And we're a little bit slightly behind here, but they did finally put onto PTR the AoE cap changes. Um, so
Yeah.
so basically, a bunch of people did some testing. So just so to catch folks up, previously you had sort of two hard caps in terms of AoE. You had, I think it was 5 and 8 target, and then a handful of things are still uncapped. But in general, it was like a 5 target AoE cap, which meant if you hit any mob above 5, it just didn't do damage to that additional mob. So if you had 6 mobs in a pack, one of them wouldn't get hit. Um, so what Blizzard has basically said is that they're implementing essentially reduced damage to the sixth, seventh, eighth, whatever over cap mob is, right? Um, in terms of the damage done to all the mobs in there. So WoW would put up a post, really sort of detailing out sort of the math behind it all, and basically like the way it works is it'll reduce damage, it looks like, on all targets in the clump. So if you hit 6 targets, you're going to do reduced damage across those 6. So I guess the idea is that it sort of brings back the ability to evenly distribute DPS across multiple mobs.
Yeah.
Um, so that you're not essentially like killing one thing higher just because in terms of AoE caps, it decided that one mob was never going to be hit, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so they WoW did a bunch of number stuff. Basically like up to the current caps, like up to 5 target or 8 target cap, soft cap, sorry. Damage is exactly the same in terms of damage done. And then it's sort of I guess a slow reduction as you get up to, I guess WoW had only tested to 20 targets.
Right.
Because they
So
assume it'll cap to 20.
once you start hitting 20, there's another AoE cap that's actually been in the game since Mob. Uh,
Yeah.
called they call it meteoring because it first really showed up with Fire Mage's meteor.
Hmm.
Um, and basically, once you hit 20, it always starts splitting damage. It stops doing increased damage. It just splits for the most part. So they only tested up to 20 because at 20, this other effect kicks in on everything, even if it's uncapped.
Right. Right. So yeah, so I mean it's a good just data to see. I mean it seems like in general you're going to end up doing like it's a slow roll down to like doing essentially no damage, but the initial bump down isn't too extreme, right? It's like a 10
Yeah.
between like 10 and or I guess 9 and like or 6 and 9% damage reduction, right? On like the 6th or ninth mob in the pack that you're doing. So it's not a huge drop down as you sort of get to that 20 target list. So you'll spend a lot of time in doing like the 60, like 55 to 65% damage, like reduced damage to mob like to pack sizes around the like the 12, 13, 14, 15 range, which is where I think a lot of those packs hit, right? You'll start to see like that
Yeah,
probably being the MDI piece.
I think in a lot of pugs you will see eight. Eight comes up a lot. That's like two packs pulled together, typically around four mobs in a pack, and so you're gonna run into eight a lot.
Mhm.
Um, which meant that the target capped at five classes previously would be real unhappy.
Exactly.
Um, the more MDI style stuff, yeah, more like 15.
Yeah.
And even there's pulls like in the Ardenweald wing of the other side. There's a bunch of stuff in there that you can safely pull together even in a pug. Like I've pulled 15, 20 mobs in there before
Yeah.
because like the stags are really safe to pull together with the moths and with the whatever imp things.
Mhm.
And then there's the birds. The birds are
Yeah.
their own special
That is true.
where like you can pull the birds safely with other things, but you can't pull the birds as safely with other birds. It's really, I think that's really interesting. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's just you can do big pulls in different places. But I think in a lot of pugs, being able to hit 8 and not like completely tank your damage is good.
Yeah. Yeah, so it'll I mean, all in all, it's a good change in terms of like, you know, everybody wants to pull a little bit bigger, wants to do a little bit more damage, and I think it's understandable that Blizzard wants to somewhat limit it, but I think turning it all the way off or having the hard cap wasn't ever really going to be a good answer to it. So good on
Yeah,
them for figuring something out, a solution to it, and I think sort of maybe get the best of both worlds in this area. So
yeah,
um, so we'll see some more testing probably as this goes on, maybe a little bit more in the terms of like the tweaks. But right now, WoW has got all the data in terms of like the actual formula and then what it looks like in terms of like damage reduction as you add remove mobs from those packs. Um so cool. And so anything else before we sort of segue a little bit? Because the final point on my list was sort of our segue into uh like sort of the
One
new
more.
yeah.
We are getting new teleporters from Venari, and by teleporters I mean flight points from Venari to the raid.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Which would be
So
awesome.
no longer will we have to do things like we have people in my guild that are like doing glider shenanigans to like get over
No,
to
I
the
do.
raid. Some of them are like dying intentionally closest to the graveyard for the raids. That then they release spirit and just like use the res there and walk to the summoning stone. Meanwhile, I'm over here like just walk, you guys. Like half of you have tank specs anyway. Just walk.
Yeah.
But
I do some
it's too
weird
much effort.
shenanigans where I run up some rocks to the I take the Beast Warden's portal, and then before you go into that area, there's like a bunch of rocks that go up to the left of it, and I run up
Yeah,
there and then I glider down. Just like seems like the easiest way,
yeah.
not having to die. So
I
yeah, no, that'll be
literally
good.
just
So
go to the Beast Warrens, get on my mount, and press W, and like I don't see the
it takes so
issue.
long. It takes so long to swap specs and stuff. I just never want to do it. So um but cool. So yeah, lots of quality of life stuff in 9.15, and it seems like hopefully it'll be a good patch. We'll see how it gets there.
This
Um,
is definitely like I don't think there's any way this doesn't get received as one of the best point 0.5 patches like ever,
oh yeah,
especially with some of the other stuff that we're gonna talk.
yeah, no, for sure. So cool. And then I guess so that's it. We'll sort of now segue into our next topic, starting with maybe something that doesn't seem to make too much sense, but I'll sort of weave it in. I think I have a way of weaving it into to the topic about old new content. So 8 years ago, actually the 10th, so it would have been 2 days ago. Siege of Orgrimmar released, which is, to be fair, one of probably the best raids that they've ever put together. And probably one of the better patches that they ever put together. So Siege introduced a bunch of new stuff. MOP in general, I think, is sort of like the what I would consider like the modern version of WoW. So it took you from like the Wrath of Lich King into fully like having daily quests and having the world change with the story as you go through an expansion.
Yeah,
Um, and then like the fight design sort of stepped it up, I think, from here. Lich King was a really good fight to sort of end, Wrath on, but then you end up with, this. Or I guess Kata would have been the other one before this, right?
yeah,
I forget yeah. But Kata was, I mean, you had Deathwing, which
definitely.
is an awful fight. But yeah, so you had MOP. I think probably the best expansion, at least in my opinion. Not that just it added monks, but there's a ton of really good fights here, like top three, top four fights ever. But this was Siege's release. So you got Siege, you got Timeless Isle, which they still to this day are trying to like build things on the
Replicate.
Timeless Isle sort of
Yeah,
formula. And they
closest
also
they've
introduced Flex Mode.
closest they've come to Timeless Isle, I would say, in my time playing, is been Mechagon. That's the closest
Yeah.
that they came to recapturing it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so it's just a great patch that came out. And I would really like to go back and do Siege. It's funny at the time people made fun of it because Siege was,
A
I think
year
it's still
long.
my, yeah, it was a year plus long. I think it ended up being 13 months before we got the next expansion. But yeah, it was a good time. It was a good
Yeah.
time. So 8 years ago, Siege of Orgrimmar patch launched, and I think the rest is history.
And eight
Um,
years of like flex rating. How long? That's wild. It's
yeah.
been
Uh,
it's crazy how we went from like prior to that you need exactly 10 or 25 players
yeah.
to then having flex and then that transition to normal and what's now heroic having flexible raid sizes all the time,
Oh yeah.
which is such a huge thing. Like being able to
Yeah. Well,
raid when you have like 23 people instead of 25. It's huge.
yeah. Yeah, and they took that same scaling, right, and put it in the real world, or like it's the open world, right? So now you can
Yeah,
all like mobs now scale based on like you can level. It don't have to be the exact same level as somebody, which I think
yeah,
is super cool too. But yeah, that was Miss patch 5.4, right? Yeah, 4.
yeah.
So but cool. So it's just thinking about old content, right? So there was a bunch of stuff data mined and also sort of announced too with 915, right? And one of the biggest things at least what that was announced, right, was the fact that they're bringing back Legion Mythic Plus, which is cool. Like it's cool that as a part of the time walking events with Legion, you can now do Mythic Plus. I think the first time it's like a 2 week long event, but then
Yeah.
like every subsequent one will be about a week long, which I don't know if I agree with, but we can talk about that. But yeah, they're bringing back essentially Legion Mythic Plus. You can do Mythic Plus in Legion alongside, Shadowlands Mythic Plus, which I think is really cool. I think the idea of like, how I wanted to sort of structure this was sort of just talk about like Blizzard sort of reusing old content. People sort of get maybe somewhat upset about it, but I think that you built a bunch of this stuff. Like it's a weird thing where people get up somewhat upset or have somewhat negative opinions of like, oh, we're just going back and redoing Legion, like Mythic Plus. It's the same. It's whatever. And then you get this idea of people being like very upset with Blizzard, like throwing out systems, which I know they're
Yeah.
kind of different in terms of content versus systems. But the idea is like, hey, if Blizzard, you want them to sort of build something and reuse it expansion to expansion, maybe it's not the systems that they reuse. It's like they leave a system in an expansion, you can go back and visit it when you want, right?
Yeah.
And so like I think that's sort of one of the topics or one of the comments I had was that like I think Legion Mythic Plus is a cool step in a direction where maybe Blizzard starts to look at expanding time walking to not be like this event based thing and more of just like, hey, time walking in some form or fashion is always available.
Yeah.
And maybe there is a rotation, right? Like you can't always do Legion Mythic Plus because maybe people get burnt out on that, but maybe time walking becomes like I guess another system, another feature, right? Where you can just go back and revisit like, hey, it would be really cool to do like, um, gosh, what was the like what was the still MOP, the one with Lei Shen at the end, that raid. Shoot.
Oh, Throne of Thunder?
Yeah. So it would be fun to do like Throne of Thunder at appropriate gear levels, right? Like
Yeah.
in game, like not having to like change your gear, like, like sort of cheese it or sort of level
Yeah.
yourself down, right?
I think that's one thing that is one of my complaints for a long time has been how all of this old content is just it's completely inaccessible. Like, yes, you can go back and do Throne of Thunder, but unless your definition of doing Throne of Thunder is walking through it and one-shotting everything and seeing like the boss's death yell,
Yeah.
um, you're not really doing the raid. And like, it would be nice to be able to go back and like, oh, I wouldn't mind like it would have been fun after we cleared Nyalotha if we had had like, Throne of Thunder or something for the like 8 months after we cleared that raid or whatever to
Yeah.
go and fuck around in. And even stuff. This is also a complaint to a degree within an expansion because there was a whole raid tier that we just didn't do on Mythic or mini
Yeah.
tier. We didn't do Crucible of Storms uh, because we just like we finished Jaina. Jaina was a miserable fight for my raid team.
Mhm.
400 pulls, absolute shit show. Uh, and people were so demotivated that like we spent like a night trying to do Mythic, whatever the first boss of that instance was.
Cabal or whatever,
Yeah,
yeah.
Mythic Cabal. And people were just like, no, I don't want to do more progression right now. I want to go. Um,
Yeah.
so that's like that. And the reason we couldn't go back and do that is because of gear scaling. Like, gear
Yeah.
scaled in a way that we literally could not go back and do or it would have been somewhere between a complete joke and completely impossible
Yeah.
because of push timers and doing too much damage and all of that. So I would love they have this thing now. You can level sync down to do questing. You mentioned this earlier. You can level sync down to do questing with a friend. So
Yeah.
even if you're different levels, you can go and quest, do world content with a friend. I would love for them to take yet another page from Final Fantasy and introduce eye level syncing. Like, I would love to be able to go back and like do those old raids that we missed.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
And
yeah,
it's all sitting out there too, which is like I sort of draw a little bit of the parallels, and this is something that Destiny. So I play a little bit of Destiny too, right? And something that they struggle with in terms of like having a live game where like you continually add more and more content to, right? Which makes sense because you wanna create stuff new, but then you have all this backlog, like this catalog of things that just sit there. And so what they ended up doing is doing this thing where they called like sunsetting. All right, maybe
Hmm.
that's I forget the way they termed it, but basically what they end up doing is like the current content's the current content, but all the old zones and things, they basically like remove them from the game for a period of time. They vault them and they
Yeah.
bring out like maybe one or two each time they do go through another season or another
Yeah,
expansion.
I think that's a good
Now,
approach. I actually, when they announced Legion Mythic Plus, I pinged Ian on Twitter, and
yeah,
it's like, hey, can we get Legion Mythic Plus for like a whole season? And like, I don't know, maybe you could do BFA Mythic Plus the season after that. You know,
yeah. It would be it
I
would
think that
be
would be great.
It would be a nice change of pace, right? In terms of like not change of pace, but in terms of like, hey, if you want to engage in this or do this old stuff, and I guess the second part of this is what's the reward for it, but at least
Yeah,
to like bring it back and be able to do it, I think it is fun, right? In Destiny's case, right, like they have like a Diablo like loot system, right, where you just try and it just drops with random affixes or random, so for them,
yeah,
it's easy just to be like, hey, current light level stuff or current item level stuff will drop out of the old
yeah,
stuff. It's easy. For WoW, it's a little bit different, right? In terms of like how they
yeah.
have to
There's stuff
structure the
like
reward stuff.
they couldn't, for example, they couldn't bring back Hellfire Citadel as a raid with the loot as is, just scaled up to current eye or down as it were
Yeah.
to current eye levels, because there are trinkets in there that broke the game, and you literally just
Yeah.
couldn't do it. It would completely invalidate all of the other trinkets in whatever expansion they brought it back in.
Right. Right. Which is why I guess the other side of this news that's interesting to me is that they the team, or I guess Wowhead or everybody sort of data mined essentially recolors of tier 20. Which would have been the Tome of Sagaris set, which would have been sort of a part of Legion and things like that. So
Yeah,
I think the idea with Blizzard, and I don't, it sounds like what they're going to end up doing is basically offer cosmetic rewards in place of like actual power increases for
yeah,
probably engaging with the time walking systems, right?
yeah,
Um, which makes sense. I mean, like to be fair, like I don't know if old content. I don't know if I'm on board with saying old content should offer any sort of power in terms of like your individual player.
yeah.
Um, but at the same time, if you don't offer some level of reward, people are just
Not
I
gonna
don't
do
know.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not gonna engage in it, right?
it. There are people that will engage with it even if it only has like intrinsic rewards, like they want to
Yeah,
overcome the challenge on their own, but they are definitely the minority. And with group content, you need a way to get the majority in there to do it with those people.
right,
Uh,
exactly.
and um, yeah, that's just how people work. I do like we do know that Legion Mythic Plus is going to have like it's going to drop relevant eye levels. Um,
Mhm.
I don't. I'm trying to remember. I think they said you won't be able to get items from Legion Mythic Plus from your vault, but you
Right, they
like
say
the end
that,
of dungeon rewards are going to be the same eye level as Shadowlands Mythic Plus, and can be upgraded with Valor.
which is cool.
But there are also like there are some trinkets that we talked about, like Writhing Heart of Darkness for tanks, that have already been nerfed. As part of this, like trinkets, I think are the main issue. Uh,
Yeah,
though I'm still like fingers crossed for relics coming back. These Legion keys, and just
God,
like I want to pull out Fuzan with like triple 140 or 246 relics or something.
yeah. Be ridiculous. Yeah, I think that'll be the one thing as they sort of look at maybe expanding the system is like having the ability to like gear swap or like keep gear relevant in that instance, right? So if you want to use one of
Yeah,
those broken overpowered trinkets, you could, but it would only work in like the Legion Mythic Plus content or like the XX expansion content,
maybe,
right?
maybe. I
Right.
do
And that
think
way you could sorry.
I would honestly almost rather them like try and bring those trinkets in line with the rest of the game. Something like Rising Heart of Darkness, they literally nerfed that trinket every single tier in Legion. Every single tier they nerfed the scaling on it because it scaled too high. You know, at one point around Tomb, it was like 16% damage reduction or something from a single
Yeah.
trinket slot. That's just insane. Um, and so they nerfed it over and over again.
Yeah.
And uh, I'm okay with that. But I also think that that only makes sense if they are giving something closer to like season long access to
Yeah, yeah.
Mythic Plus. Like if it's a 1 week event, not getting your best in slot trinket that only comes from Legion time walking during a week long event is not fun.
It's not gonna feel good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would have been my comment. It's like the only way they do that, I would say they do that is if it's like a permanent fixture, right? Like you could
yeah.
jump in whenever you want,
Like
right?
but I do think like give us a season of Legion Mythic Plus in addition to Shadowlands Mythic Plus. Like I barely do Mythic Plus as it is, but give
Yeah,
me a
yeah.
season. Give me a season where I can go and do Court of Stars.
That's true. Yeah, I guess for me, I don't know. I feel like I don't know how, and I don't know how Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy would be the other one that's one of the things I always hear about Final Fantasy is like the old content can like it can still be done at max level, right? Or like can still be
Yeah,
done.
there's limitations and quirks. So I've actually done some of the scaled content.
Hmm.
Like so they have a button you can push when you enter an instance, basically, with a pre-made group that says, sync our eye levels down to. It's called like there's a min eye level scaling button that
Yeah.
puts you at the minimum recommended eye level for that content. Um,
Okay.
so this is like where you could queue into it with the dungeon finder kind of eye level, absolute minimum, and it works. You can kill stuff. We went back and did a Realm Reborn, so like 2.0 uh, raids basically with
Hmm.
some people from Brew Lounge a couple years ago, and had a good time with that. But there are limitations to it because as part of the scaling, it levels you down as well. So you lose abilities. And that also means that because they redistribute the abilities across the leveling experience, that means that sometimes you lose important buttons that you would have had if you were doing it or like back in
Originally, yeah.
2.0. Stuff like being missing important tank cooldowns. But the way the scaling works is it ends up being okay anyway because the I don't know inflation in general power of the classes kind of makes up for it. So it was
Gotcha.
largely okay. Um, but yeah, they're like it's not a perfect system, not at all.
Yeah.
But it does like we went back and we did Garuda. We got most of the way through whatever the Earth guy's name is. Um,
Never played the game.
um, Titan. That's it. And the
Gotcha.
issue with Titan is so you have infinite battle reses in Final Fantasy. It's really just
Mhm.
limited by when you die, you have a permanent or semi-permanent like damage reduction effect. So dying's still bad, but you can just res people over and over again. You can't do that on Titan because the main way you die is you get knocked off the edge, and your body does
Oh
not go
shoot.
back up on the platform.
Oh, that's not good.
So no infinite battle reses. Uh, but we got like all the way to the Enrage and just like needed to like clean things up a little bit to be able to actually finish it. And then what was it? 8.2 came out and we stopped.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, because I think that would be. I mean, that sounds interesting, and that would probably be something that WoW has to sort of maybe refine and get better at. Is sort of yeah, what happens to things you were expecting when you did the content at level, like classes to have certain things or certain abilities to be able to do certain stuff, right?
Right.
Because like how far back could you go, right?
Yeah.
Like but yeah, I mean, I think it would be fun if they spent some time revamping that because I think it would take. I don't think it's something you could just flip on and off for
Yeah.
them, like just like
Yeah.
copy paste or enable it or whatever. But
I
I think
don't
it
think
would
it
be a
is.
cool thing that they could investigate, sort of, offering us the ability to go back and do like, dude, I would do Lei Shen every week, like at appropriate item level, because that fight was just so much fun to do. And
So here's
um,
here's a here's the thing. So something I mentioned in a previous podcast episode is that I would love for them to do more of the mini raids where like we've got a Trial of Valor or well Trial of
yeah,
Valor really the more appropriate tuning level I think than Crucible of Storms for a great team like mine. Although I think my great team is at a point now where if we went back and did if we were in BOD again we actually would have been able to do good progress on Crucible. Um,
yeah,
but anyway, I do think that like I would like to have like in these point 0.5 patches some additional raid content because like we're on track to finish Sylvanas before 9.1.5 comes out
yeah.
without too much. Um, what do you think of instead of doing mini raids? They did remaster raids like in a point 0.5 patch. Hey, this time around, and even for some of the larger raids, they might have to break it up. Like this time around, it's this wing of Hellfire Citadel, or it's this wing of Throne of Thunder.
Yeah,
And,
that
over
would
the
be,
course of the expansion, you get like an entire remaster of Throne of Thunder or something.
but it's like piecemealed out. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's like
yeah,
three
like
bosses at a
each.
time.
I mean, that would be a cool. That would be interesting. I think the question I would have is like, again, I always go back to like loot wise, like what's the incentive beyond just, hey, it's now appropriate, right? Because I know like my raid team in particular, they do the minimum in terms of, well, maybe not the minimum, but like most of the people that I play with are not like, "Hey, WoW's the only game I play" type people, right?
Yeah,
I do have like a handful, like probably more than like probably like 7 or 8, 9, like probably like 7 or 8 people that I could say would do that. But then the majority are people that raid log, right? They log
yeah,
in, maybe get a Mythic Plus or 2 done. They'll hit Mythic Plus hard in the beginning of a tier, but like now it's just like a ghost town. So to
yeah,
get those guys to zone or just sign on for like, hey, instead of doing like Sylvanas, we're gonna do Lei Shen today, and like, oh yeah, Lei Shen just drops like a transmog item and maybe a
yeah. They're not
melt,
gonna do
right?
it.
It's like
Yeah,
cool.
I I
I'm
do
good.
think
So,
so.
but it
By
would be a
and
cool like gear
large,
thing.
um,
Sorry.
most gear in WoW is boring, right? Like your chest
Yeah.
pieces, your legs, your boots, they don't really matter. They're kind of interchangeable. Like a chest piece from Lei Shen is the same. Well, not this tier, but the same as a chest piece from Sanctum in general.
Yep.
The real distinguishing things are like trinkets and weapons with special effects, and the oddball item that has a special effect on it that's not one of those things. And I think
Hmm.
if they leave those in, do a little bit of tuning, or even do like the half step eye level thing that they did with Crucible of Storms, where like it was a half tier up from like the from BOD. So like if you went and did heroic Crucible,
Yeah.
it could help guilds that were still progressing heroic Jaina, which weren't that many at the time, but the
Yeah.
heroic only guilds exist, and you know having something where you can go and you can do heroic uh part of heroic Throne of Thunder, get
Hmm.
some half eye level step up, so like three bosses worth of heroic loot that's like Sylvanas eye level
Yeah.
would be neat.
That'd be cool.
Or because I think it would be really kind of cool to be able to do that and be able to over the course of the expansion, because if they're gonna retune it, I would hope they would do it in a way that like every tier that they could just like, okay, so 905, let's
Yeah.
using Shadowlands as an example, 905 we get the first wing of Throne of Thunder or something, broken up kind of how the LFR wings work,
Yeah.
and it drops like eye level 233, and then the next 915 that goes up to 246 or whatever, or 252,
52. Yeah.
and we also get the second wing, so then like you can go through and like do the fights again,
Yeah.
and if you already got it on farm then it's like no big deal.
Yeah. And you can, I mean, and sort of fits in like all because at that point the difficulty is going to be people remembering how to do the mechanics or like because the execution's already known. Like I'd expect like I wouldn't expect the fights to be different, but
Yeah,
yeah, at that point it's almost like you get sort of like what like ranking up your gem, your set. Well, I guess not this expansion, but or this patch, but it'd be like ranking up your Sanctum of Domination gems generally gives you slightly more power, right? To make
yeah,
things easier and like you know getting additional loot from like your cat or your great vault and stuff like that. Like all that type of stuff that sort of used to be based on like Valor points way back in the day, or original Valor points way back in the day, or like and then
yeah,
upgrading gear, and like MOP that they had, right? Like similar, you get a slight power boost. Yeah, that'd be cool. Particularly if it would, yeah. I mean, if they, I think it's maybe a little bit more work on them in terms of like adding
yeah,
items, but I think it would be an interesting way to like give yourself like reuse some of that old stuff, go in and make it somewhat important or maybe somewhat not important. Like
yeah,
your world top 100 guilds aren't going to go in there and do it maybe once or twice just for fun, right? Just to
yeah.
see what it looks like.
I
But
mean, I
yeah, for
I
guild,
know for a fact there are raiders in limit right now that did not do Throne of
yeah, that's true. Yeah, it'd be cool to go back and do that type of stuff. So, yeah, no, that was all. I think that was yeah, really good ideas. And the funny thing is, as I'm sitting here and we're talking through this, I realized we actually just barely mentioned the reason that this conversation started. Right,
Thunder.
it started with
Which
Legion Mythic
is the
Plus,
Mage Tower data mining.
which is yeah, the Mage Tower data mining. So like. the reason I guess this long form, like we talk about sort of reusing old content, is the fact that Blizzard, they're not Blizzard, but a bunch of data mining has data mined a lot of new teleport spells with late ID. So if you guys don't realize, everything in the game is ID'd in sequential order, generally speaking. And so as things come up at later numbers from a sequential ordering perspective, they're considered new. And so what Blizzard did, or what was data mined, was a bunch of teleport spells that sort of equate to the different areas and zones that came from the original Mage Tower scenarios, which Mage Tower was probably the last large like point or X dot point five patch, right? The Mage Tower patch
Yeah,
was fairly large in Legion, and added Mage Tower, which is a solo scenario. So it was a scenario done. There was probably like 5 or 6 different ones, but they equated more to your role than anything else. So like healers had
yeah.
their one,
Tanks had
DPS
one. There
tanks
were
had one, and then there was 2 or 3. Like, I guess Lincoln says there were 7. Um,
there were 7 total, so there were 5 different DPS ones.
4. Or yeah, 5, yeah. 5, sorry, you're right. I can't do math today. But yeah.
Yeah,
So and it was a cool bit of solo content you did. And really the only reward was you got a
you
different
got a
skin
transmog
for
piece.
your
Yeah,
legendary item. But it's honestly, to be fair, I think a lot of people say some of the best content that they've ever put in the game. Because
yeah,
it was challenging enough at the time where you had to put in a concerted effort to do. And they put a couple of systems around it where you could just like mass spam going in there. Like you had to like there's like a
yeah,
currency to get keys, which eventually you got enough from doing daily stuff that the keys didn't really matter. And it
yeah,
was hard enough that you wanted to go in with like flasks and food, and
yeah.
I don't know what
I
I don't know if there
remember
was
trying
oil,
to do
but
it in, I guess it would have been like Heroic Nighthold Gear. Um,
yeah.
and being like eye level, I started doing it on my Brewmaster like eye level 190.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sorry,
and
around
I
like
think I finished it
188. Yeah.
around like 5 or 890 and 905, whatever the eye levels were in
Yeah.
Legion.
Yeah, no, I think when I finally did, I don't remember the item level, but I know it was like the 3rd week after it was released is when I got it. And I remember like getting it and just being like, because it was such a cool, like, the reason I think Mage Tower was so cool was particularly because of how tightly tuned it ended up being, that like I remember, like, getting to, like, the final phase, like, the final stage of, like, the healer one, and, like, you fought a boss. There was, like, a bunch of movement stuff you had to do, and, like, the first time I did it, I didn't do enough damage, so I ended up dying, just, like, the room filling up and killing me,
Yeah,
and, like,
yeah,
you'd make, like, little mistakes. Like, I remember, like, one pull, I was well ahead on DPS, but I made a mistake in the final room, got clipped by something the boss did, like, some avoidable thing, ended up
yeah.
dying or falling enough behind. Um I think, yeah, and then, like, you'll hear stories of, like, with the healer when you had NPCs who would help you do damage, like, somebody actually completed it even though they died because their NPCs did enough damage to, like, kill the
Finish it
boss
off.
for them.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's, like, you hear all this stuff, and I think that was so cool at the time because it was the first time they ever did it, and to be fair, I'm glad that they didn't just add something like this every expansion. Like, there's a part of me that's like, I really would like to do it again and again and again, but at the same time, I'm also excited that, like, I got to do Mage Tower and experience that, like, at the
yeah,
time, and I think
yeah.
if there was a Mage Tower every expansion, it sort of loses its, like, appeal, I
I
guess,
think
right?
there is more room for them to do that kind of solo progression content.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to look like the Mage Tower,
Yeah.
because at least for me, like the Mage Tower, I don't even remember at this point how many pulls doing it on my monk, um, trying to get it before Tomb of Sargeras came out, and
Yeah, I did, like,
like
hundreds, yeah.
it it was really cool. That was I was not rating Mythic at the time. Clearing Heroic is not quite the same kind of experience. At least the group I was in was like we weren't clearing Heroic the first week, but we were clearing it the first month,
Mhm.
um, ish,
Yeah.
and ish. I don't remember actually how long it took us to clear Nighthold, but it was not like we had cooldown on farm before we were doing the Mage Tower. So like, yeah, I don't know. It was like I do think there is room for more of that solo progression content. Of like, here's this really challenging thing for you to do solo. You have to do it solo. But then there's like this room for there to be communities like Beacon Serenity where people come together and talk about like, hey, how are you doing this? How are you approaching
Yeah.
this? How can I do this?
Yeah, and I think they tried. I mean, there well, it's not solo. There is like solo progression stuff in your Sanctum this expansion, but like I feel like they
It's
missed the
not
mark on
hard.
like Yeah, that's the problem is it wasn't hard and, like, the class I mean, the big example is, like, the Kyrian one, right? Where, like, you
Yeah,
literally had to, like, cheese it to beat it. So, like, it wasn't that it was too hard or difficult, it was, like, it was just broken, like,
yeah.
it wasn't tuned right, it wasn't balanced right. And so, I think in a lot of cases, like, bringing back Mage Tower now would be cool, but I think that to your point, I think they need to find a way of, like, building Mage Tower-like activities into the game, like, moving forward. And to be fair, I don't think like, if I was them, the way I'd look at this is, like, Mage Tower was not a release, like, at release, it was, like, what, the 2nd patch of Legion, right?
It was
Um
released in 8 or 7.1.5.
Okay, so it's like after the first point one patch, yeah, point X
Yeah,
patch, yeah. So I think that's probably a good place for like stuff like this, where like you have like having it launched doesn't make sense because it's way too much. I think it's just way too much stuff to
yeah,
do, and I think it loses its sort of appeal there. But yeah, I mean, I'd be fine. I think if they brought back scenarios like this, but
yeah.
I don't know. I
And
feel
like,
like
I think that
maybe
the game would
sparingly.
benefit a lot from more steady, frequent patches.
Yeah,
People
that's
going, "Oh, is this patch going to last a year?" Like, that's not good.
yeah,
Like, we should know. Okay, we're going to get another patch in 5 months,
yeah,
and it's going to have something in it. I do think this is one area that I think the consistency of the Final Fantasy patch cycle is also a good thing. I don't think it needs to be as rigid as theirs, because theirs is like, okay, you've got a specific amount of time between each patch, and all the like the even numbered patches have raids in them. Odd numbered patches have kind of like the point oh versus point 0.5 patches for WoW have
yeah,
not raid stuff in them, so they might have fishing updates or craft updates or other new stuff to do. Um, that kind of like, but important. I think the important thing is the consistent schedule. Like,
yeah.
that this is coming out, and if they did something like every you know 4 months is a new patch. 4 months from 9.0 to 9.0.5. And then another 4 months from 9.0.5 to 9.1 is actually very close to what we actually got.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be I mean, I think both of us have said this probably in some capacity now, like more frequent and probably just yeah, more structure. Maybe not more structure, but I think more frequent patches is always a good thing. Just in terms of changes, right? Because I think to be fair, the game does get somewhat stale in like month 6 or month 8 of a
yeah,
patch, right? And I
yeah,
think, yeah, there probably needs to be some sort of shakeup, even if it's minor in between that. But yeah, I just don't know if WoW. I think the biggest problem with WoW is that they have they've essentially sort of tried to build themselves as like the I don't know if this is a good analogy, but like the blockbuster movie, like summer movie. And like the idea is like every patch has to be something that's like, wow, this is crazy. And I don't know if that's the case. Like I think if they sort of tempered it and just was like, hey, this is like quality of life updates patch. Cool. Like let's just run with it, right? Like the 915 stuff that's mostly like quality of life for alts could have been released like weeks ago, right? And like that would have been the focus of a shorter patch. Then you have like your 9.1.6, which is like all this like Legion time walking, maybe some of the bigger, more major
yeah,
changes, right? So I think that yeah, I think that to your point, they probably just need. I mean, maybe it's a better job of like giving us small incremental things that sort of again would have built up a typical 915 patch cycle. It's just we maybe got some of it after 3 months, some after 4 months, and then the rest of it after like the 6 or 8 month that the actual
yeah.
patch cycle was.
I do think as well, like having Legion time walking in 915 is going to be so big. I would
Yeah.
honestly be shocked if it didn't come back like right away. Like,
Yeah.
if we didn't get a hot fix 2 weeks after it went away saying like, hey, it's back and it's up for the rest of season 2.
Yeah, I think it'll drive a lot of like I think people enjoy going back at things they've experienced the first time, just sort of try and recapture that. And I think this is like an easy thing for them to like key on. Like I did this like to this day I still go like Destiny 2 added the Cosmodrome back, which was the opening zone of the original Destiny that you started in. And we're playing
Yeah,
original Destiny, super cool. And like to be fair, I loaded up Destiny 2 and like bought all the season passes for the last time they did when they did this sort of like they called it Beyond Light expansion when they brought back a bunch of old zones and content and stuff like that. Because I just wanted to re-experience it. I wanted to like walk
yeah,
back through that opening
yeah,
area and like redo it again, and uh, yeah, I think it's an easy way to cash in. I think the problem is going to be like how often they do it, right? Like,
Yeah.
does Legion time walking stay forever now, and like it's just
Right.
another
I
one of
don't think
those
that's
things,
good. Yeah. I think like you run into this issue where if you've got too many different kinds of things people can do, people are too spread thin and you
right?
can't actually do any one thing because there's not enough people interested in that one thing. But
Exactly,
I do think
exactly.
like bringing it back for like a larger block of time, like you were mentioning with Destiny, where they're like, you know,
Yeah,
this zone is back for this season, and then it's gonna go away next season. We'll have a different zone that comes back, but don't worry, like if you missed it, it will eventually come back.
like cycle back through. Yeah,
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 I think that's
yeah.
good.
Which I think is cool. So, but yeah, I mean, Mage Tower coming back. I wonder what the rewards are going to be because I feel like the
There's
transmog stuff.
the tier 20 updates that you were mentioning earlier that are like speculated to it. I wouldn't be surprised if it also let people that missed Mage Tower the first time get their artifact appearance.
Yeah, which would be yeah,
I
as long
would
as they
be on
scaled it
board for
up
that.
and it was similar difficulty. Yeah,
I would actually be really happy if kind of tying into this. This is pure speculation for what I'm about to say is
yeah,
if they brought back uh the mop and wad dungeons as mythic plus at some point and then like doing plus 20s gave you the challenge mode skins because you can't get those anymore.
yeah. No, I'd be down for that. I think there's like a people get unreasonably upset about that stuff sometimes, and to be
I
fair,
think fuck them.
to be fair, so I will tell you that I have a weird relationship with transmog in terms of like it essentially allows people to sort of show off gear that like maybe they got like they just went and
Legitimately.
farmed like yeah like it gets them to people to show off gear maybe they got it like by farming stuff like 3 years after it was current or like two
Yeah,
expansions after it was current, right? But at the same time I'm like it's sort of like if you want to do that you can
that's
do
one of
that because
the
I still
things that I
do it.
think is well, like the Mage Tower had this too, where like if you went and did it during Antorus, like it wasn't a joke. Stuff could still kill you, but
No, it was a
it was going
joke.
to take you 20 attempts maybe instead of 100.
I did all three hunter specs at the time because I thought like I
I
have
mean,
a weird
the only hard hunter spec one was the survival one. That was the
yeah
only one that was even hard in the first place.
but I did all three hunter specs and literally took me. I think I three shot the survival one, and I think I two shot the other one just because I like watched a guide
Yeah,
and then I overgeared the hell out of it.
yeah,
um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess if it's appropriate, the appropriate difficulty stuff, I think, yeah, it'd be cool. I
yeah.
mean,
Like if they brought back the challenge mode stuff
yeah,
back, is like basically instead of getting the teleport, or in addition to get you in
yeah,
addition to getting teleports like you did back in the day, you
yeah, the
also
transmog,
like you would get the transmog like you did from completing the challenge modes. I think that would be cool. It would be totally like in keeping with it. And like if people are gonna get mad about like, oh no, my transmog that's been exclusive for half a decade, like, man,
yeah, that's
I want
true.
that
I mean,
stupid bow transmog for my hunter.
I think actually, to be fair, as long as they didn't put it like maybe I'd be fine with that. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's translate what you want. It'd be cool as long as you still have like a similar difficulty to get it. It's like whether you
Yeah,
got it
yeah. As long as
today or
it's not
like
like
6 years ago.
if they turned on the vendor and they said, oh yeah, now you can just buy it for gold, like that's kind of silly. I
Yeah,
which you can do with all the arena transmogs, and I think is silly for similar reasons.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But cool, yeah.
But yeah,
So maybe Mage Shower coming back. A lot of reusing old content. I think it if this is something WoW goes down like and explores a little bit, like the dev team in terms of like bringing back select things each expansion, or like letting us go back even like mid expansion to go do older content that offers like appropriate level
yeah.
rewards or just difficulty can be that. I think it's a cool avenue to add some variety to the game, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like the first cutting edge I got, the first like end boss I killed on max difficulty was Argus. So there's a lot of really good raids that we know are really good raids. Like there's no question about whether these were good raids, even by modern standards,
yeah,
that I just haven't done by virtue of not playing at the time or not
yeah,
raiding at the time. And it's free real estate.
yeah. Yeah, it's and the funny thing, it's hilarious how like two of the best raids ever are in MLP. Like just thinking about that expansion was like so good at the time was so like was universally, I think, like panned at the start because it was pandas and yeah, but yeah, no, there was some
Pandas and
good, even like
dailies.
yeah, pandas and dailies, which is like, to be fair, like dailies was a direct response to like Kata having nothing to do other than raid, right?
Yeah.
And so like they added dailies to it, which is just yeah, but it added all that stuff. So I don't know. It'd be fun to go back and do those raids, particularly the MOP ones. Those should be first if I was choosing. So both yeah, Siege, Throne of Thunder, even to a lesser extent, Mogrish and Volts. Like there was a couple interesting fights in there too. So all right,
You
cool.
want to do
So
the
we
lore
are
corner or the off-topic question?
let's do the off-topic question because the lore corner is a little light, and I feel like maybe we could combine that with like all the different
Okay.
houses. So yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so we'll skip lore corner this week just because light on time, and we'll go right into questions. So as always, Q&As. You can reach out to Emallson or myself, ping us questions, tweet at us. You can just yell at us in Discord, or you can yell at us live here if you are live as we stream this.
Hi, Lincoln.
Um, what?
I said hi, Lincoln. Oh, he's not in chat
Yeah.
anymore.
So we have one question today comes from La Trappe, and they ask thoughts on today's race? Question mark. So race in this case is the Formula One race in Monza, which is in Italy. And then who is more dominant, Mercedes slash Red Bull or Holy Paladin slash Dispriest? So in terms of the race today, give quote folks who don't watch Formula One a quick background. There are two individuals that are fighting for the championship. One gentleman by the name of Max Verstappen and one gentleman by the name of Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton has won the last 7 world championships. Kind of a baller, dominant. Max Verstappen is a younger driver known for his aggression and is fighting for his first championship essentially. And actually, as a competitive car, I think the biggest thing for you to know, Mercedes is like the evil empire. Basically, they are just extremely dominant with a car that was seconds faster than the rest of the field, which in Formula One is unheard of. And this year, they're much closer in terms of performance. At any event, in today's race, Max Verstappen went for a gap on Lewis Hamilton. They collided in the corner, and Max's car landed on top of Lewis's car.
Oh my god.
And they're both out of the race. And luckily, Lewis unscathed. There was actually the rear tire on Max's car actually landed on Lewis's head or like
Oh my.
in his cockpit. So luckily, they have this device called the halo, which basically is like a bar that surrounds the top side of a driver. So like it took the brunt of the impact. But in any event, thoughts on that is, I think at the end of the day, Max gets a 3-place grid penalty next race. So he gets wherever he finishes, he'll start 3 places behind that. Appropriate. He went for a gap that wasn't there, although Hamilton didn't leave him any space. So also, I'm a fan of Max and not a fan of Lewis. I will always side with Max in this case. But I mean, he was just in general overly aggressive. But it happens. They crashed, so it is what it is. I hope Max still wins. In terms of dominant, we have Mercedes and Red Bull versus Holy Paladin and Dispriest. To be fair, it's Holy Paladin and Dispriest are the much more dominant pair in this comparison, only because there has not been a race or raid where those two classes have not been brought in terms of world first racing or even just world first races or just in terms of general power. Mercedes and Red Bull both have bad tracks, both have the ability to crash out and be bad. Holy Paladins and Dispriest don't have that. They're always good, regardless. So definitely the more dominant pair in this case. So sorry, Emerson, I took that one just because I
Yeah, that's
realized you
fine.
probably know nothing about
It's
Formula
also
One.
timely, like talking about today's race next weekend. Not quite the same.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That is true. But yeah, Holy Pound Dispriest, the much more dominant pair over Mercedes and Red Bull. Because they don't
Poor
crash into each other.
misweavers.
To be fair, poor Misweavers, poor Druids, poor Holy Paladins, poor
Mm,
I mean shamans are like warlocks in the context of like
yeah.
somehow their utility is always
Spirit Link
useful.
Totem. Just Spirit
Well,
Link Totem.
Spirit League Totem and even like Windrush is very good, right?
Wind Rush is good, but you
Uh
can bring an Elemental Shaman. An Elemental Shaman does not bring Spirit Link Totem.
that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. So, but yeah, in any event, yeah, those are. I think that's the episode. I think that's the
I
questions.
think
We nailed
that
it.
is the episode.
Barely under time. Barely under time, but we
We
did
made
it.
it. Even
Yes,
starting late, we made it.
that's true. That's true.
But that is going to be our show for today. Thank you all for watching and or listening, for the questions and the chat. And we will be back same time next week. Hopefully not late. and yeah, that's the show for today. If you all enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it and you want to support what we do here and on Peak, all the guides and the sims and everything that we do over at Peak of Serenity, you can do that over at our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And if you can't or don't want to contribute to the Patreon, come join the Discord. Come hang out. Come help. Ask questions. Give answers. We had a bunch of white names, aka regular old people, doing some log diving when we had a log. I actually wanted to talk about this today, but forgot. We had a log where Brewmaster's Bone Dust Brew hit for 2.3 million.
Jesus.
So they actually went through and figured out what was going on, and it's this weird interaction with you have to specifically be running Higher Mirror, have a Blessing of Sacrifice up, and get a Bone Dust Brew proc at the same time. And this was on Guardian where they were taking 5,000% increased damage from an extra Obliterate cast. And so they got hit for like 10 million damage. If they weren't running Higher Mirror, they would have just died and nothing would have happened. But because they were running Higher Mirror, they went into Forgeborn. And that meant that the Blessing of Sacrifice triggered to do damage to the Paladin. And then apparently Blessing of Sacrifice damage counts for Bone Dust Brew. And so in general, that's probably like a DPS gain to have a Holy Paladin cast sack on you while you have Bone Dust Brew up, because it's probably going to do okay damage. In this particular case, that meant that it sent 20% of the 10 million damage that he got hit for to the Holy Paladin. Obviously the Holy Paladin, there's like a cap on how much damage they take from it. They didn't like kill the Paladin, but the Bone Dust Brew proc then saw that 2 million damage and said, oh, 65% of that. And then it crit.
Holy shit. That's crazy.
So yeah,
that is crazy.
Regular old people, shout outs to Kate and Meshsin and the others in Brewlogs that sorted all that out. That's really cool. Thank you for doing that.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's our show. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week.
Bye.